Architecture and film have a close relationship, with a mutual respect for one another. Both have been spurred on by technology and style for the past few decades in parallel, with many skills crossing over from one to the other. Although a newer art form, filmmaking shares many similarities with architecture, not only in the process itself, but also in the preoccupation with concept, rhythm, narrative, and detail. I have an affinity for both architecture and film. When they are at their best, they are rich, complex works with multiple layers that offer an opportunity to immerse yourself in the experience. The experience becomes even more rewarding the deeper you dig and the more you find. I'm trying to combine both art forms in my own way. I'm trying to make connections between what I believe to be very similar artistic endeavors. So I ask myself, what would the architectural spiritual twin be of the movie Parasite? On an extremely esoteric and emotional level, what building would represent the essence of Parasite? This is a video exploring two works in completely different fields. This is an attempt to understand each of the works better by looking at certain principles that make film and architecture so similar. Join me on my journey as I explain the premise of this video. If the film Parasite was a piece of architecture, what would it be? The answer is, it would be the V&A Museum in Dundee in Scotland. To understand the context of the works, we have to understand the artists and their frame of reference. Kengo Kuma is the Japanese architect of the V&A Museum in Dundee, Scotland. Kuma has always been drawn to his Japanese tradition with its clarity of structure, implied tectonics, and the importance of light and transparency. He uses composition and technology to take unexpected materials like stone and provide them with a sense of lightness and softness. He looks at using light and materiality to establish a relationship between space and the natural world. He speaks of the recovery of place and its existence in nature and time. Materiality of the architecture as well as the surroundings complement each other. They reference the technological advancements that have been made to enable the use of materials in different ways. He says, "I want to find a balance expressing form and material. The form of the building should be as subtle as possible because then the material's character can reveal itself." He is interested in the techniques and technology of making a building. Most of the history of architecture is about the changing styles of architecture. But behind the change of style, there is often a change in construction methods and changes in the way materials are used. Bong Joon-Ho is a South Korean-born director and writer of Parasite. With 7 directed films to his credit, he has achieved a huge amount of respect in the film industry. His films are typified by featuring social themes, mixing genres, black humor, and sudden tone shifts. Mother, Snowpiercer, and Okja received huge critical acclaim, with the latter two being American co-productions. Bong's directorial technique gives his actors a great deal of freedom when performing. He has written every movie he has directed, and his defining trademark is his sudden tone shifts, sometimes even within scenes, between drama, darkness, and black or even slapstick humor. Actors have commented how precise he is and how sure he is of what he wants. He meticulously plans every scene and films it exactly as it is intended for the edit, with no coverage and no superfluous detail. Whether it is a film or a work of architecture, each work relies on a strong central concept as the spine onto which the rest of the body hangs. Without a strong concept, a work will not hold together. It will be a series of events with no cohesion. There must be a driving force that runs through the entire body of the work, providing a reason for every frame and detail. The central reason for Parasite's existence is the commentary on class. It tells the story of two families, the impoverished Kims who infiltrate the wealthy Parks by posing as a tutor, a driver, and a housekeeper. It shows the huge divide between the two classes and their apparent irreconcilable views of the world. The Kims envy the Parks, believing that money will solve all their problems. With time, the disdain for the Parks is legible on their faces. The Parks, on the other hand, are completely oblivious to the hardships experienced by the poor in the lower city, and seem to make no attempt to even try and understand them. Although it would have been simple to pick a family for us to sympathize with, Bong chose to portray neither family as the villain, but neither two are either of them blameless. Kuma looked at the dramatic sea cliffs of Scotland for inspiration for the museum. The striations of the cliffs informed the aesthetic. The idea was to push the building into the River Tay, and so doing create a relationship between nature and the city. The natural materials provides a new feeling for the city's edge. One also cannot miss the reference to the ship's prow and the geometry reaching out into the water. The building has a hole cut through it, effectively creating two masses. This is used by people walking to the waterfront in the new promenade. The museum encourages movement connecting the river to the city. Kuma's intention was to democratize the museum. He described it as a living room for the city, a place where people could come and meet. Both film and architecture rely on an overarching rhythm. It can change over the course of an experience and over the various components, but it reflects the invisible, the underlying composition that, unless you're specifically looking for it, goes largely unnoticed. It gives the whole its character, often in very subliminal ways. Parasite has an incredibly tightly controlled structure and rhythm. Impeccably shot and wonderfully acted, Bong has said that rhythm and pacing are incredibly important to all his films. He begins by telling us all we need to know about the families. The film is divided exactly in the middle by the doorbell ring of the original housekeeper. This signals the end of one movie and the beginning of another with a completely different tone, almost another film genre. Bong speaks of the tempo that his actors have and how the scene adapts to this tempo.
제시카 외동딸 일리노이 시카고 과선배는 김진모 그는 이사촌.
The movement upstairs from low to high represents the movement up through the social classes. Similarly, the Kims are washed down the streets to the poor flooded neighborhoods, just as the trash of the rich is washed away by the rain. The rain has very different implications for each family. It brings blue skies to the parks, but means disaster for the Kims, as it virtually destroys all their belongings. Rational architecture is typified by an underlying economical structural grid. It defines the frame of reference and helps modulate the proportion and scale through major and minor rhythms reflected in the space and in the detail. Kuma's museum does not appear to have anything like this in its planning. The external concrete walls appear to be also its structure. The shape and structure work in unison. There is no grid to help understand this work. Instead, it is experienced and felt. As with many contemporary freeform architectural works, you cannot apply the conventional analytical proportional tools. The sense of rhythm instead comes from the subtle craft of Kuma's expertise. His ability to mold form, space and proportion with a delicate touch exemplifies his mastery. The rhythm of the building is further represented on the surface by the horizontal stone cladding. This provides a way of unifying the masses and detail, whilst also allowing interruptions with incisions that become delicate interventions instead of merely holes in a solid mass. The narrative of a film is the connected series of events that carries the storyline. It is about the full experience, typically in a 3-act structure. For architecture, it is represented in the form, the physical presence of the mass, and what it attempts to communicate and accomplish. With Bong also being the writer, Parasite's narrative is carefully crafted by Bong personally. The first half introduces the impoverished basement-dwelling Kims with the rich, perceived naive, oblivious Parks. Through a series of interconnected events that follow elegantly on from one another, the viewer develops a deeper understanding of the characters and witnesses the infiltration of the Kims into the Park's comfortable lifestyle. The first half of the movie is spent setting up and preparing the real thriller that is about to unfold. The foreboding storm clouds over the house just prior to this signal the change in tone that caught us all off guard. From here, the story twists and turns through some more uncomfortable and unexpected moments to culminate in a garden party. This proves to be a fitting crescendo to the narrative. Looking back on the story, it almost has a sense of inevitability. The script then settles to another pace, and the stage is set for the future, implying the story is not complete and it will not be for many years. The form of the V&A appears as two structures at the base, then rises to join at high level in what appears to be actually quite a rational plan. This is not appreciated at the ground plane. the mass carves away in carefully crafted concrete geometries, obscuring, revealing, and peeling back where necessary to reveal either entrances or function spaces at high level. The hole cut through the building breaks the mass and encourages movement through the building. Dundee residents and visitors are connected to the building and to the river, even though they are not entering the museum itself. The museum sits quite comfortably on its site, making the right formal gestures to its surroundings. The horizontal stone elements are fixed to the concrete structure, unifying the mass, and add an elegant layer of detail. The slight offset at each of the panels imply a natural imperfect mass, much like the cliffs themselves. Internally, the main atrium rises up, unifying the space with the exterior ornaments changing in material to the softer aesthetic of timber, but with a similar scale and refinement. Instead of the form bearing down over you as it does outside, it leans back sympathetically to open up and bring light in. It is in the detail that the care and love for a project is exemplified. Attention to every composition, every angle, every nut and bolt that tells the observer that every aspect has been considered, worked, and resolved. It is an affirmation that the art form is a craft. It is this level that elevates a narrative to a high art form. Generally, this level of craft comes with experience, knowledge, and caring. Parasite had an extraordinary amount of careful, considered detail, symbol, and references. The more you dig, the more you'll be amazed at the thought gone into every decision. In Parasite, architectural devices play a large role in the story. Stairs, windows, walls, and floors are all charged with visual clues to reinforce the central premise. There are so many scenes that are beautifully composed, each carrying their own message. This scene in particular exemplifies the care. Note the composition. The scene is divided straight down the middle. Kim's chaos on the left and the starkness on the right, almost like everything is cut in two. They are about to move across the divide to the second part of the movie. This also demonstrates that although they are in the park's world, they don't look like they belong. The V&A in Dundee has carefully crafted details evident in the connections to the facade. Kuma has initiated a research lab at the University of Tokyo which specializes in developing appropriate and advanced technologies for construction. Kuma's office uses software to enable a seamless process from the architect's computer to the fabricators to enable a greater sense of control. Every piece of stone and fixing was coordinated by the architect and fed directly to the fabricator. The love for detail is evident in numerous areas. Kuma even speaks of developing the detail along with the initial concept, and not as something that comes at the end as part of detailed development. Each work exists as a collection of compositions and as a whole. Each one has a rhythm to its execution and a strong concept as a basis for the art form. They embrace the concept and build on it and around it. They are both works completed by highly accomplished craftsmen, both completely skilled in their respective crafts. Both these works will leave you wanting more. Both will be enjoyed the more you experience them. This may take several viewings or multiple visits. Parasite leaves you with a lot of clues that you will appreciate the second time around, and the museum will leave you wanting to return for both the art content as well as the calming natural rhythms of materials and space. I invite you to explore them in depth at your own leisure.